first group of letters we're going to learn how to pronounce are called the short vowels. And we've already touched on the first one. It's the letter A. It's pronounced as the first A in the English word America. A. Or you can also think of it being pronounced as the U in the word but. But we will hear many examples from the Sanskrit language itself of how to pronounce this letter. We don't need to dwell on it now. It's quite a simple one. It's A. But one thing I will call to your attention is, notice how I have next to this letter, I have the word short written in all caps. Now, there's good reason for that. It's because I want to make sure that everyone understands that this vowel is a short vowel, distinct from a long vowel, which we're going to learn about a little bit later. I will tell you more about the distinction between the two, but just for now, make a mental note that it's short. And in fact, all of the vowels in this first group of letters that we're learning are short. The next one is E, written with the English letter I, pronounced E. I give some examples here how to pronounce it. Pronounced as the letter I in the word bit, or as the letter I in the word pin, or sometimes also pronounced as the word E in England. And in fact, the latter, the E as in England, is technically the correct pronunciation, but I as in pin is understood and in fact much more common for many words. For example, the I as in pin pronunciation is what is heard more commonly when you say the word or hear the word Vishnu. Vishnu. It sounds a little more like I than I. You can also hear Vishnu. Vishnu. You hear the difference? Vishnu versus Vishnu. Slight difference there. Technically, the correct pronunciation, I believe, should be Vishnu. But the difference is very, very subtle, and this is the one exception I was telling you about, how I mentioned in the previous section how the letters of Sanskrit are pronounced consistently. So once you learn how to pronounce it once, you can know how to pronounce it no matter where you find it, in which mantra you find it, it's always pronounced the same. Well, this letter, this short I, is slight exception to that because sometimes it sounds a little bit more like Vi, like I, as in Vishnu, and sometimes it sounds a little more like I, as in the next example, Yo ni nila ya yai. See, I'm going on to the next example here. An example of the I as in England pronunciation of the short I. And the Sanskrit example there is Yo ni nila ya yai. And there's actually a couple places there where that short I is found. The most important thing to remember, oh, and there's one more Sanskrit example, Mandasmita, right there. Mandasmita. Again, it's Mandasmita. Again, it's a short I, as in England. But the most important thing to remember about this letter and the previous one is that they are both short. They are written as, the first one was just the English letter A, and the next one is just the English letter I. No diacritical marks, no line over the top of them, no dots underneath, no marks whatsoever. And they are short. And again, we'll cover what short means in a moment and how it's distinct from long. The next letter is written with the English letter U, and it's a short vowel as well. It's pronounced as the U in push. This is an example where I'm not really pleased with the English example that I've given here. It's the best one I could think of and that I could find on the web. But this is kind of a rough approximation of how this letter should be pronounced. We will say many Sanskrit words as we go on through this rest of this document which contain this short U sound, and you will hear exactly how it's pronounced in Sanskrit words. But for now, just listen to my voice. U, U. And it's short is the thing to remember. U. So the first three that we've learned so far are I, U, I, U. All three of them short. The next one, and the last short vowel that we're going to be learning, is written with the English letter R, but with a dot underneath it. So this is our first diacritical mark, and that dot underneath it makes it pronounced as the RI in the English word rim, or the RI in the English word rip, but with a flip of the tongue on the palate. The palate is the roof of the mouth, the top part of the mouth, not like the English R. So here's another case where I'm not pleased with the commonly given English examples of how to pronounce this particular vowel, this particular letter. You could say it's like the RI in rim or the RI in rip, but it's not, because in English when we say the letter R, we don't say it the way they make the R sound in Sanskrit. In Sanskrit, there's no such thing as a like we have in English. It's always made with a flip of the tongue, a throwing of the tongue up against the roof of the mouth. So it looks like this. If you watch my mouth, re, 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 re. Some languages do say their R's with a throwing of the tongue. In fact, many languages outside of English use that flip of the tongue against the roof of the mouth to make their equivalent R sound, like Spanish, for example, para, or the Scottish. Even when the Scottish pronounce English words, they will say rubbish, for example. They'll say rubbish. They throw their tongue up against the roof of their mouth. So pretend like you're Scottish or something, or speaking Spanish or Italian, and you're always throwing your tongue up against the roof of your mouth to make your R sounds. And that goes for this short vowel, re, and also for a consonant version of R that we're going to learn about later on. But this is the vowel version, and it sounds more like re. Also in South India, you will hear this R with the dot underneath it pronounced more like ru rather than re. And the truth is, it's neither re nor ru. It's somewhere in between, but people have to add some kind of a vowel after the flip of the tongue, because otherwise you can't hear the flip of the tongue. But the R with the dot under it actually represents the pure flip of the tongue action itself without any vowel. But you have to have some vowel, you can't hear it. So it's either re or ru is the way it's heard. So that concludes all of the short vowels. And I have written here a very important note after I've introduced the 4 short vowels. You can see it right there next to my finger. Important. And I'll let you read along on your own paper there, but it says important. These 4 vowels, I, U, and re, are the only short vowels in Sanskrit. They are held for only 1 count and should be made as short as possible. There is no pause after a short vowel, even when it occurs at the end of a word within a sentence. So we will be talking about that more later. In fact, actually, I will mention it now. Here's an example of how to pronounce a short vowel at the end of a word within a sentence. And the example is Brahmakarma Samadhina. See it next to my finger there? Brahmakarma Samadhina. And the way I say that you should pronounce it is as if it were written on this next line, as if it were written as one long word with no spaces in it. So it should be pronounced as I said it, Brahmakarma Samadhina, not Brahma Karma Samadhina. If you put those pauses in between the words, what can happen is someone who speaks Sanskrit, who understands Sanskrit, might think that you're extending the short vowel and making it a long vowel. For example, the short vowel at the end of Brahma, they might think you're making it into Brahma, long A, which it turns out means something different from Brahma. You actually change the meaning of the word when you make a short vowel longer than it should be. See, we don't have this concept in English, and nor do we have it in many languages, most languages around the world, that you change the meaning of the word depending how long you hold the vowel. But in Sanskrit, you do change the meaning if you hold your short vowels too long or if you make your long vowels too short. So it's very important to pay attention to how long you're holding each of your vowels and hold them for the appropriate length of time. Otherwise, you will literally change the meaning of the words. And the words won't fit into the meter of whatever chant or song you're singing as well. So that I emphasize that point because it's a point where it's the most common point of mistake for most beginning Sanskrit chanters and singers. It's the point where most beginners make mistakes. So I have a note here just for completeness that there is a pause at the end of a sentence or line, even if it ends with a short vowel. That's kind of obvious. You're always going to pause at the end of the line. Now, to distinguish between short vowels and long vowels, I have written next here, all vowels other than these four are long vowels and should always be held for 2 counts, twice as long as the short vowels. Okay, so next we will cover long vowels.